Hi and welcome to the Fancy Comma YouTube. Today I'm going to talk about some of my dream jobs and some jobs that people wish I did. This is kind of wild. I asked Google, what are my dream jobs? And it told me some of them. It says, Sheeva Ozma's dream jobs are centered on high-level, impactful science communication and policy work, specifically being a Tony Stark of SciComm. See, I'm a real MIT graduate, Tony Stark, so take that. I also redid my personal website. That was really hard. I still feel like it's not perfect. But is anything really perfect? I feel like no, it's not. And I really think that as freelancers, we should, instead of judging our work by whether we feel like it's perfect, we should judge it by whether or not it gets results. So if I get more clients thanks to my website, or I get noticed more, or I get better PR or something, I'll consider my job well done. I'm one of those people that knew what they wanted to be when they were a kid and then grew up and did that. When I was a kid, I really wanted to be a brain surgeon and study the brain. And like, granted, I'm not a brain surgeon, but I would like watch brain surgeries and be like, oh, that's really cool. And I got like obsessed with it. I was telling everyone I knew, like, oh, I'm going to go study the brain. Like, even like, was it my birthday party? Was it someone else's birthday party? We're at like a Chuck E. Cheese type of place. And I was like, I'm going to be a brain surgeon. And then obviously everyone was like, wow, that's so impressive. And so I kind of like got supported in my STEM efforts really early on in life. But yeah, then I got a full ride to my local state school and I was like, I'm going to study chemical engineering and make fake blood. And then I went to MIT. I got into MIT. Go Beavers. And then I was like, I guess I'll just do chemical engineering without realizing that it's like the #1 school in the world for chemical engineering. You should never do something without really knowing what it is. In college, wait, no, I take that back. But if you're going to be like at one of the #1 schools for engineering in the US, don't just take engineering just because you didn't want to signal to everyone that you are not an engineer. This is like a really hard lesson I learned. Being an engineer is like a whole ethos. Being a neuroscientist is a completely different ethos. And when I was going to meet with my chemical engineering advisor to tell him that I decided I was going to study neuroscience, I felt like an utter failure. But my advisor told me, basically, I don't remember exactly what he said, but something like neuroscience is a completely different discipline than chemical engineering. It was cool to study engineering too, because it was kind of like my bucket list to, I don't have a real bucket list, but I have stuff that I want to do that I just think about. And I'm like, sometimes if it's when the time is right, I can go for those things. Studying engineering and like immersing myself in equations was one of those things, because I was always told I was good at writing growing up, even though I liked science. And people asked me, what are you going to do with your life? And I was like, I want to be a brain surgeon. And that's actually a scientific discipline. But then I feel like I never did anything really in science, like specifically. It's pretty hard to get experience in brain surgery in high school anyway. But yeah, so that was one of my bucket lists, was like studying engineering at the #1 school for science and engineering in the whole world. I'm so proud. Love my sweatshirt. But now that I'm a freelance science writer and I also work as a policy consultant, there's other dream jobs I have. I always hear people talking about their dream jobs, and that never made sense to me because my dream job was so almost unattainable. Like, to become a neurosurgeon, you have to first get your undergrad degree. Then you have to apply and get into medical school. Then after you go to medical school, you have to do training. You have to do your like residency. Then you have to do specialized training in brain surgery, I think. That that has a lot of different steps, a lot of different places where you can get rejected, and it takes forever. My path to being a neuroscientist was actually like relatively straightforward. I mean, like I got into college, I got into MIT, I graduated after 4 years. I did it. Good job, me. And then that's me patting myself on the back. And then I worked for 3 years at Massachusetts General Hospital. And then I applied to graduate school and I went to Georgetown. Then I did my grad school, left with my master's, completely paid for thanks to the taxpayers. You could never have a master's paid for by taxpayers in science because there is no master's in science really. And the ones that are incredibly expensive. So that was nice. Do I wish I had my PhD? Honestly, yeah. I pretty much do in my mind anyway, because I still publish in science. So yeah, but it was never really my dream to like run a lab. I always found that way more complicated than it's really worth. I do like thinking about science and writing about science, and I do consider myself to be a scientist, and I am a published scientist too. But that's been a whole journey of recognizing that I am a scientist because I have 2 science degrees. And I'm one of those people that believes that if you even have 1 science degree, that makes you like a science person. But there's a lot of people that they have a science degree, they go into a completely different field, they never tell anyone they have a science degree. A lot of women do this, and or women I've talked to, or like I'll like find someone on LinkedIn and they work in like something, and then their undergraduate degree was in something STEM, but they don't work in STEM anymore. I find that really sad that people don't think they're scientists. But anyway, so this dream job thing. So yeah, my dream job, I don't think I knew what my dream job was when I was in grad school. I knew I wanted to do science policy. I definitely wanted to do science policy. I moved to Washington, D.C. just so I could work near Capitol Hill. And I also wanted to do science writing because I had done a lot of writing. I had all through college, high school, grad school, I did writing. I interviewed people. I got into a little bit of student journalism. I had a radio show. I was all about communications, but I was also all about science. And it's like, that's not really a job that exists in the world. We have the communications people, the like writer types, and then we have like the scientist types. It's very rare. I mean, maybe it's not that rare, but I feel very weird about being both of those things. It's amazing though, because like I'm such a writer and I'm such a scientist. I'm like totally both of those. So I think this is my dream job. The one really bizarre thing about this job is it's not one of those jobs that you read about and you're like, oh, I'm definitely going to become this when I grow up, because the path to become a freelance science writer with a science background is just, it doesn't even exist in society. The one good thing about writing is that it's very versatile, especially for someone in the sciences, because there's so much science out there that no one understands. If you can explain science and make it interesting, there are many people in the world that cannot understand science at the level that you can as a scientist. So that is a very powerful skill. The only problem is when you come to writing and communications from a science background, you're kind of like Ariel in The Little Mermaid, where you're like looking at everyone with their legs and you have your little mermaid fin and you're just like, I just wish I could be like them. They look so happy in their world of comms. I wish I could join them. That's how I felt when I was in undergrad, and I thought it was like really quirky and interesting to hop over to Harvard for a day to go to the Harvard Institute of Politics to see Mike Capuano speak. He represented Somerville, Massachusetts, where Reddit was founded, by the way. And I recently realized that the founder of Reddit was my neighbor back then when he was founding Reddit. It was a perfect time to, that was like the quietest neighborhood ever. No wonder he was able to found that whole website. But anyway, what was I saying? I have no idea. I miss Somerville. I miss Davis Square. I miss Massachusetts. Anyway, so I went and I saw these politicians at Harvard, and I was like, wow, these people are so cool. I really want to be like them. There's no way in heck I could be like them because I'm so sciencey. And like, you know, it's really difficult as a science writer to just like join these people in the work that you're doing, because writing is actually really hard. It's not that glamorous. It's a lot of thinking and a lot of introspecting and a lot of looking at the world through different lenses, trying to figure out what people want to know and learn. That's the hardest part. It's like, how am I going to know what other people want to know? I mean, I guess I could like run a poll, but that wouldn't even really tell me what they want to know. So, but then when I do this work, I don't feel like I'm being creative. And I've written a blog about this, and I'll link that blog about being a science creative. It feels like hard work. It doesn't feel like just sitting and writing and like looking out the window and seeing a bird and being like, oh, look at this bird. It's so beautiful. I'm just going to write 500 words about this bird. It's so, just reminds me of life. Like, that's not how my writing is at all. It's such a mess. But yeah. But anyway, so I decided, you know what? I'm just going to put my dream jobs out there. And they're my dream jobs. I don't have to achieve them. I'm really happy doing what I do as a freelance science communicator and policy consultant. But hey, maybe I could do some of these things too. So one of them is write a speech or ghostwrite an op-ed for like an important person. So I was one of my high school's graduation speakers, and the way I got this was one day they were like, oh, hey, we're doing a speech writing contest to see who can be the graduation speaker. And so I was like, oh, well, I want to be the graduation speaker. That sounds really important and cool. So I like put together my speech. I think I was like in the library. My high school got remodeled, so none of the places in my mind exist anymore. But I went to the library. I probably typed it up. This was like 2000. Computers were so much more primitive back then. But I remember I turned in my speech idea and it got accepted. So then I had to actually practice my speech because my parents were like, are you just going to go up there and read this? No, you have to practice your speech if you want to give a good speech. So we got our camcorder. We didn't have cell phones back then. I sat and read my speech. My parents provided feedback. And when I did my speech the first time, I was like, this is terrible. This is so bad. But then my parents were like, nope, you got to do it again. So I did it a bunch of times. And then on the day that I was supposed to give the speech, I got to the graduation arena. I was so nervous. I was just crying, sitting and waiting for them to call me to go up there. I remember my classmate was looking at me like, or I don't know, maybe we all felt like that, but it was so stressful. It was very dramatic. And then I went up and it was so windy. I went up and tried to give my speech. My hat almost blew away, but luckily it was a great speech. I quoted Henry David Thoreau because we had been reading Walden, and I've been to Walden Pond, by the way. I love Henry David Thoreau and I love Walden. There was a period in college where I taught a high school class on American Transcendental Literature as an MIT student. But anyway, I quoted Henry David Thoreau, and I said, if you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them. So I was like amping up my classmates, and I was giving them this whole thing about like how we're going to be so successful and like we're going to be like Olympic athletes and we're going to like have astronauts and all this stuff. We haven't had any astronauts, but we have had like several really good athletes, people in the sports world. That was a really memorable speech, and I really enjoyed giving that speech. But I didn't end up giving another speech except for like MIT debate team stuff until maybe like 2025 when I planned to stand up for science. And by that time, I had actually gotten into speech writing while I was a substitute teacher. One day I was subbing middle school. One day when I was substitute teaching, I was also listening to a class that I had gotten into for free, thanks to speechwriters of color, about how to be a speechwriter, given by like these really famous speechwriters. And so I was like learning about how to structure your speech, how to have a hook, the different rhetorical devices, which I never learned because I never took a English class in college because I tested out of it, and I took all my humanities classes in Spanish so I could get a Spanish minor. So anyway, I was like learning about speech writing while I was being a sub for a middle school science class. So that was such a weird feeling. It was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Is any of this ever going to work out? Why am I learning speech writing? I don't think anyone like me could be a speechwriter. Like, why would a politician hire me to be a speechwriter? Those were all the thoughts that were going through my mind as I was like learning about speech writing. But then when it came to planning the Stand Up for Science rally at the Oklahoma Capitol, I actually knew everything about how to write a speech. So I wrote this really good speech. I gave the speech. I literally stood at a podium for the first time, like in front of people, a lot of people. It was less people than my high school graduation, but it was still quite a few people and people that were very interested in the topic. And I gave this really great speech and I wrote it myself too. I didn't get help from anyone and I thought it was really good. It hit all the high notes I wanted it to. By that time, I had read the speechwriting memoirs of Cody Keenan, the speechwriter for Obama. David Litt was another speechwriter for Obama that had gotten his start working for The Onion, so he's like really humorous. I read that guy's memoir. I read Kellyanne Conway's memoir. I had read like all these political memoirs. So I kind of made my dream job come true. But the thing is, I would love to see politicians give speeches that have more scientific facts in them and speeches with like real substance, like something that you can really like hold on to, evidence-based speeches that are also rhetorically sound and great. I don't see a lot of that. So I would love to putting it into the universe. One of my dream jobs is to write a speech like that for like an important person. It doesn't have to be a policymaker. Policymakers are really good speechwriters. Political figures are the best speechwriters. And sometimes they write their speeches, other times their staff writes their speeches. I learned reading those memoirs that Obama famously would ask for like a draft really quickly, and then he'd like go through it and like cross out stuff and make it his own. That's one of my dream jobs. So then another one of my dream jobs is to write something that Congress uses in deciding policy or making decisions. So like sometimes you'll be watching Congress, watching C-SPAN, and there'll be like a person hold up a printout from the New York Times and be like, have you seen this article? Or like they're talking to someone like at a hearing and they'll be like, have you read this article from the New York Times? I love that. That's like my favorite thing. And I'd love to be that person, the bylined person that gets their article read in Congress. That is when your article really is doing something, is when it's like literally in the policy making sphere. So another thing that I really want to do, which I feel like is impossible, is write something without having it be edited 9 million bajillion times. I get why people edit. I'm an editor of myself for the Fancy Comma blog, and we do accept pitches, by the way. If you go to fancycomma.com/write-for-us, you can pitch us. And yeah, I do a lot of editing. Fancy Comma's blog has a specific editorial style. We do have formal editorial guidelines, which are linked to on the Write for Us page on the Fancy Comma blog. But it's just that when you come up with an idea and you send it to your client, then they edit it into oblivion. It becomes a completely different thing. It's almost like, why did you ask me to write this if you're just going to like turn it into something else? And like, I get it. I gave them the deliverable that they needed. But I really wanted it to be this other way. My pet peeve is when I write something and it just completely goes unused. And that's happened so many times. I really want to see my work out there. And to be honest, I need more pieces for my portfolio. So like write something really amazing, unique, one of a kind, evidence-based, never been seen before. And then it never gets posted. That drives me batty. One of my big goals when I first started Fancy Comma was to have it be mentioned in a major publication like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. I realized that's not actually that important. And I think that would be really, really weird. But it could also be really cool. I'm definitely open to it. I just have increasingly realized how like we would have to be really important to the news in some way. And I don't know if I'm ready to be that newsworthy. I'd rather not. I'd rather stay out of the limelight. So those are some of my dream jobs. The other day I was just like sitting around and I was like, I really want to write a novel. And I was like, where did that come from? I'm like almost entirely a nonfiction reader. So maybe I'll write a novel. Maybe I won't write a novel. even better. Some things that I don't work on that people have asked me to work on. The first thing that I never work on is stuff that is not evidence-based, or that I find, what's the word? That I find just like not ethical. Like, for example, when I was first getting started, people would write me and they'd be like, hey, can you please write about my weight loss supplement? And I would be like, no, because that's not right. I just don't believe that it's right for people to make money off of people's desires to have like a model body. And it's amazing. I guess it tells you that I've been in this career for a while, that now we have GLP-1 inhibitors. I don't work on the things where it's like someone is like, hey, can you please help me write about my healing crystal? On some level, I get it. Your healing crystal is healing. It helps you. But when you ask me to write about like healing frequencies of what? Sound? You got to give me some scientific reality-based evidence to work with. That's the challenge of being a freelance science writer, is people will approach you with their non-scientific ideas, and you have to actually lay down the law and say, look, I'm not going to work on this for you. I have way better things to do with my time. And I would love to see things that are actually scientific. It's like that phrase, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So show me the data. If it makes sense, I'll write about it. There's some stuff that will never make sense to me, like certain parts of quantum physics still don't make sense to me, and I've really tried to understand them. But it holds up. It can be replicated. This healing crystal thing, I'm not super sure about it. I just feel like people want to make money off of other people's ignorance. That's just so unethical to me. Another thing that people reach out to me often to do is get PR for them. And I do public relations, and I usually do that in the form of like writing press releases or coming up with like outreach strategies is something we can do that we have done. But one thing we cannot do, that is not possible, is to get your article placed in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, or really any publication, because we are not the editors of that publication. And there's no real way to do that unless you have something that's really interesting to those publications. Think about it from the editor's perspective. They need to have stuff in their pages that are entertaining, newsworthy, all of the things that you expect from a publication like New York Times or Wall Street Journal. So just having some random person, like let's say me, get in touch with them and be like, oh, hey, you really need to know about so-and-so. Here's an article that we wrote that you should publish. Like, that probably doesn't work that often. I mean, I would love to meet someone that has been able to do that easily. Usually those people are able to achieve that by having a timely pitch, by reading the room, seizing the moment, that kind of thing. It's not like you can just email them. You can't force the New York Times to publish your article. There's no amount of money that would make me be able to do that for you. Despite that, people are often, like more often than I would like, to be honest, reaching out to me and being like, hey, can you help me get published in the New York Times? It's kind of like, my friend, I wish that I was published in the New York Times. That's another one of my dream freelance jobs. I have pitched the New York Times several times. Pun intended. I haven't been published there. You could hire a PR person to email around, make press contacts, and so on, but that doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. I guess the exception would be like if you're a really famous person, very newsworthy person, then you could maybe pitch them successfully. But at that point, you don't need to hire anyone since you're that famous. So I guess my advice to them could be get so famous that everyone knows you. And then people will want to know what you're saying every 5 seconds. But yeah, that's something that people ask me to do all the time. It's like, can you get me published in like this big fancy publication? Can I pay you to write this article that will automatically be published in the New York Times? I like to think my writing is good, New York Times quality, honestly, but I can't do that for you. I'm sorry. So yeah, I'm going into 2026 with this like more realistic outlook. Honestly, being in your 6th year of running a small business is so much easier than being in your 1st year of running a small business, or even your 2nd year, or even your 3rd year, or even your 4th year, or even your 5th year. It just goes to show that perseverance is really a thing that really works. So tell me, what are your dream jobs? What are some jobs that people have asked you to do that are not possible? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. Thanks for watching the Fancy Comma YouTube. Make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe so that you don't miss our future videos. And thanks for watching.